Okay. Pleasure to meet you, Ian Reid, CEO of Birmingham Commonwealth Games. Thank you so much for taking part and agreeing to do our motivational inspirational project during these challenging times. Before we start, obviously, it's great that Birmingham have got the Commonwealth Games for 2022, but I wanted to find out a bit more about you. So what does the Games actually represent to you?
Yeah, great to be here, Andy. Thanks for the introduction. So, look, I've been lucky enough to have been through the full journey in organising the Commonwealth Games back in 2014. So you can tell from the accent that was in Glasgow. And look, I've always been an avid sports fan. I will watch any sport with huge enthusiasm. And back in, crikey, that'd be what, 2008 now. I was offered the opportunity to go and work on the organising committee for the Games in Glasgow, and it really transformed my life, because it's very unusual, I think, where you genuinely find a mix of a job that you really want to do with your passion for sport, and suddenly moving from probably like a lot of people getting out of my bed in the morning and it being a bit of a struggle to go into work, to actually looking forward to every day was quite a change. And it was a fabulous journey, and actually what it really showed me was the power of these multi-sport events in so many areas. So the sport in Glasgow was fantastic, going in that journey in terms of not just the elite athletes, but what it did in terms of physical education and benefiting the community from a physical health and well-being perspective, but also in terms of what it did in relation to regenerating the city, putting the city in the world map. And the bit which I think will be absolutely mimicked here in Birmingham and the West Midlands is that whole civic pride piece, and actually people coming out, supporting an event, and really having huge pride in their city was something that as a Glaswegian made me hugely proud. And actually, you get the bug. So after I finished in Glasgow, I tried to go back to the real world and did a job in a great company for a few years. But when the opportunity came up here to get back into the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, I just couldn't let it up, and hugely enjoying it. And it's just fabulous, hugely powerful, brilliant journeys, and it's great that you get to work in something where the whole team's pointed in one direction, knows when the opening ceremony is going to be, and there's a fabulous product at the end of it. So yeah, it means a huge amount, Andy, and really proud to be in the position I'm in now.
Thank you for your answer. I mean, looking at the mission statements and how the Games will benefit the region as a whole and local communities. I mean, what do you think? How would that equate into the Games with regards to volunteering, accessibility?
Yeah, so we've gone out with a bold mission statement around kind of focusing in 5 areas, and that first one, as you rightly say, Andy, is around bringing people together. So how do you use the Games as a vehicle to make sure it's as accessible in all its forms to everybody, but also use it in a community which is hugely diverse like Birmingham and the West Midlands? How can you use it actually to make sure all those opportunities for people to get involved, be it working in the organising committee, being a volunteer, being a contractor, being part of the ceremonies cast, being involved in the Queen's Baton, really, whatever it is, just simply buying a ticket. How do you make sure that all of those teams are reflective of the region? And also some of the feedback we got, because when we developed the vision, we didn't just do it in a boardroom, we went out and talked to about 4,000 or 5,000 people across the region, and they were telling us that they're hugely proud of the diversity of the city, but actually a lot of communities still do primarily socialise and do business in their own communities, and this was a real vehicle to make sure that all of those opportunities I've just outlined are reflective, and get those communities together. So that's a huge part of our plans around, in particular, as you say, that the kind of mass opportunities around volunteering, contracting and ceremonies in the cultural programme, to make sure that all communities get those opportunities. And and that has started off really well. Everyone's engaging. huge amount of interest. So I'm sure we will get there come 2022 in terms of that workforce.
I mean, I saw recently that you've signed up to the Include Me West Midlands with the West Midlands Combined Authority and Sport England, and the Birmingham, what is it? Sorry, the Disability, the Disability Activity Alliance, and coming up with that new idea of new participation, equality initiative, and 3 ways to support listen to me, show me, and my channels. So, I mean, how does that equate to obviously inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, and if we maybe start from the sport, Andy, and we are proudly saying we're, from a sport perspective, we're the most inclusive Commonwealth Games there will ever be. So we've got the most medals ever in terms of the para programme in a Commonwealth Games. We've also got, for the first time ever, actually slightly more medals for female athletes than male athletes. Hugely proud of both of those things. But you're right, what it actually translates into then, if you're going to talk about that at the elite level, how do you make sure that flows down? And we have been doing a lot of work, both with a lot of the agencies in the city, but also some of the event specialists and the accessibility space, to make sure that right at the start of our planning, we're considering everything about how we support all the athletes that are going to be here, how we make sure a lot of the venues that we use are best in class. But more importantly than that, engaging, as you say, with the combined authority in the city around, when we're thinking about our transport infrastructure, that making sure that perhaps we can leave a legacy from the Games in terms of much more accessible benefits around getting from venue to venue that the city can retain long after the Games. So that thinking's relatively early on, but everybody's signed up to making sure that it's as accessible a Games as there's ever been.
Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Hannah and Owen now. They've got some questions, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you. All right, so Hannah, Owen, over to you.
Thanks, Andy, and Ian, great to meet you, and thanks for the opportunity for asking you some questions. So I've got a couple of questions. First of all, how instrumental are young people going to be to keep the legacy alive through volunteering, for example?
Yeah, really good question. So we fully recognise that the Birmingham as a city and the West Midlands as a region's populations, compared to a lot of other areas in Europe, in fact, is one of the youngest regions right across the continent. But interestingly as well, the Commonwealth as a family of countries, I think almost 60% of people in the Commonwealth are under 30. So in terms of youth engagement, it is very high up in our priorities. And part of the reason actually that early on in our development, we changed our sports programme a bit, recognising that we all know there's certain sports that will attract to the young demographic more than others, and we brought in clearly beach volleyball to try and help with that. Clearly 3-on-3 basketball, which I know, Andy, you're passionate about, and para basketball as well is in there. We are also hugely passionate about that, and the benefits that can bring, not just in terms of what I'm sure will be a fantastic venue for 2022, but actually already working throughout the communities, because it's a sport that we can really get on the streets, get people engaged in, and try and get young people excited about what's coming. Because I think what we're planning to do, Hannah, is try and build out, and I'll not give too much away yet because it's not announced, but try and build out a real centre in the Games that's much more focused on young people. So it's got those sports perhaps in the same place. It's got DJs coming in, it's got a fabulous cultural programme on the same site, linked much more focused on young people, and really try and create that hub that they can engage with. So that's kind of from a sport perspective. In terms of opportunities, so you're right about volunteering as one. Traditionally, actually, this has been a challenge for multi-sport games. Traditionally, the people that have primarily volunteered have been of an older generation. So there is a challenge for us about how we make sure it's attractive. But I think the biggest thing we can do is recognising all those job opportunities that we've got, is how do we reach out to actually give young people a chance to work on the Games and help the games lead to longer term employment. Because we all know right now, and it's clearly over the last few months, economic conditions have become even more challenging, that the games is a gift for the region. It's potentially somewhere between 15,000, 20,000 new short-term jobs. So we recognise they're not jobs for life, but what we're working closely with the combined authority on is something called the Commonwealth Skills Academy. So we're going to reach right across the region, target those not in education or employment or on any training, and say to them, if you come in our training programs, which we're doing in partnership with the colleges, we'll guarantee you a role on the Commonwealth Games. That might be a paid role, it might be a volunteer role, or it might be with a contractor, but we'll guarantee you a role, provided you go through the journey with us. And then what we're also doing is talking to a number of businesses in the region and saying, if we've now got a group of really well-trained, ambitious, motivated people who have proved that they can work well on the games, will you take them into longer-term employment as an outplacement programme? So our overall desire is to have a group, hopefully a significant number of people who, because of the games, have moved into longer-term employment and have a training and real ambition on the back of it. So that's the one we're really focusing on, because that can make that long-term difference, and hopefully we will get there. And there's some great people working on it, so I'm confident we will.
Okay. Thank you. That it all sounds really, really exciting. As a school games organizer myself, working with I actually work with 67 schools in total in my patch in Birmingham. So I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all the school games organisers that would, more than happy to help support any educational initiatives that you've got coming out. That actually kind of leads on to my second question. So Birmingham, as you will know, is an extremely multicultural city with 187 different nationalities. How can we use the games to engage a more diverse group of people so that the games can reach everyone in Birmingham?
Yeah, great question. And we've been challenged at the moment, rightly so, on exactly that. And I think firstly I should say we've got some great assets to do that. Right? So one of the reasons that we were really keen to add women's cricket, for example, to the programme was to reach out to some of those Asian communities who we know are hugely passionate about that sport. I remember when the Cricket World Cup came to Edgbaston last year, I took my kids along to England v India, actually. And I have never been to a better atmosphere in a sport ground in my life. It was incredible. And driven primarily by the Indian fans. It was an amazing festival, and we need that to be the same for the women's game while it's in Birmingham 2022. So I think we've got some great assets. We talked about some of the other sports earlier in this discussion as well. So they are there, but at the same time, we shouldn't shy away from the fact there will be a lot of communities out there right now who aren't engaging with the Commonwealth Games, perhaps don't think it's for them. And that's really not just the organising committee's job, but the wider partnership right across the city around how do we reach out. So one of the things we've been doing as well is traditionally in games, it's difficult to engage the kind of third sector, the voluntary sector. And that's because to raise money for the games, we have we tend to very strictly guard our brand and our intellectual property. And the reason for that is because we sell that to raise sponsorship money to private companies. However, what we've done here is create something called the United by Birmingham 2022 brand. So it's not our main brand, but it's quite similar. And the idea there is that we give that IP and we give an association to the games to third sector organisations across the city who are coming up with projects that align with our mission. And a number of those projects are about youth engagement and they're about physical health and well-being. And I think we're now up to 30 organisations who have signed up and are launching fabulous projects to support our ambitions in that space. And what that's really helpful for us is, we've got a lot of great people in here, but they're focused on delivering an event. We're now creating this big network of organisations who are out talking, focused, and really making sure people are not just aware of the games opportunities, but aware of what they can do in their communities to make sure people can access opportunities, but also contribute in ways that might not be ones they would traditionally think about. So, our cultural programme around the games will run from probably about April, May time right through to September in 2022. There's funding there, there's an incredible number of opportunities. So perhaps even in, if you're not that interested in sport, but actually dance or singing or whatever else is your thing, there's huge opportunities there as well. So the real challenge, to answer your question specifically, is getting that network of organisations that can go in and make sure people understand what's coming, because if we don't do that, we will get the traditional Commonwealth Games audience, which tend to be people, primarily white from in their 40s or 50s who come along and watch the sport in huge numbers. That tends to be what happens based on our research, and we don't want that. We want an audience, and we want engagement that's reflective of the region. So still a lot of work to do in that space, and we need a lot of help, but it's everyone's desire to get there.
Okay. Is there any upper limit to the number of organisations that can be part of that?
Nope.
United? I don't know.
Nope. So if it's worth going on the website. If you've got any ideas around projects that you think could support those vision and mission pillars for the Games, then there's an application process. If we end up with 100, great. If we end up with 1,000, even better. So definitely worth a look, and share that with your network if you think there'd be interest.
Yeah, well, I know that Sport Birmingham have already had a couple of ideas endorsed by it, and actually the Birmingham SGO, the School Games Organiser Challenge Portal as well, has been part of that. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. But no, I was just curious, to be honest. And yeah, Wincliffe Primary School, I think you were there because they helped launch the cricket.
I remember a great visit.
Yeah, they were absolutely buzzing that they got the opportunity to do that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that was a great day. I ended up having to juggle cricket balls, if I remember correctly. That was one, but it was a great day. Yeah, great bunch of kids actually.
Oh, brilliant! Well, thank you once again.
No, not at all.
Okay, over to you, Owen. You've had this finished.
Yep. Hi, Ian. Great to speak to you. Firstly, before I ask you my questions, I'm also a resident of Perry Bar, so I'm very, very excited about having the Games on my doorstep. Also, like Hannah, been involved with a number of the Sport Birmingham endorsed programs as well. The Daily Mile, the Pathway to Podium, and the Inclusive Sports Fest. So those things are really close to my heart. We've looked at the work that Glasgow did, and all the work that you've done has really been lauded in terms of its economic impact on the area and other aspects of the Games as well. How do you feel that Birmingham will stand out from previous Commonwealth Games? And in particular, how will that process impact on local and regional organisations in terms of legacy?
Yeah, good question, Owen. So, I mean, I think going back to the Glasgow comparison, I think what Glasgow did very well was plan really early in terms of what they wanted from the Games, and were very targeted around. In particular, there was an area in the east end of the city where a lot of investment went in, where the village was located, the new velodrome. So there was a physical regeneration desire there, which worked very well, that has genuinely transformed that area of the city. And of course, all the benefits flow from that in terms of the community as well. So they were very focused. And the challenge we've always had in the Games in Birmingham was that time challenge. So if you compare Birmingham to Glasgow, Glasgow probably started bidding and thinking about bidding for the Games maybe 12 years before the Games themselves. I know a group from the City Council went down to Manchester in 2002 because they were all already thinking about hosting in 2014 at that point. Now, you all know the history whereby these Games were originally meant to be in South Africa, and Birmingham did a hugely admirable thing in stepping in. But what it's meant is we've had to accelerate a lot of that thinking. But on a really positive note, I think that's coming together really well. We've got now a dedicated legacy team. There's a new joiner to the wider partnership called Nicola Turner, who's Director of Legacy, from a skills background, interestingly, what we were talking about earlier. And she's really put in place a really strong infrastructure. We've got a Legacy and Benefits Committee now who have got representatives from across the region. So that thinking is really accelerating. It's focused, I suppose I was going to say it's focused on the skills area to some degree. That's not fair, actually. There's projects right across a number of areas. But I think it's become more important than ever, Owen, now, given where we are in terms of the COVID challenges. So I was always a little bit worried about the economic conditions and whether the politicians and others would say, is this a good use of money now, given public finances are so stretched? The complete opposite has happened, which is absolutely the right thing to do, where people are looking at the Commonwealth Games and saying, do you know what, in terms of contributing to the region's recovery from this, what better project could we have that's going to bring all those jobs I talked about earlier, infrastructure acceleration works, and a real focus on jobs, skills, and longer term legacy. So I think that the priority around all of those things now, if it wasn't already important, has become even more so. And therefore, we are starting to see wider government engagement, greater investment in other projects. So, for example, trade, tourism and investment is a big area to put all our great companies we've got in the West Midlands on the map, but also recognising this is we've got 1.4 million tickets to sell. We've got maybe another 1 million people engaging in a cultural programme. We've got 1.5 billion people watching on TV. So it's once in a generational time to showcase the city. So you need to invest in tourism, making sure when people come in, that they come back again and again, and really build that tourism offering in Birmingham and the West Midlands. And that's a huge area of focus as well. So it's all about capitalising, not just for the games themselves, but on that longer term. But coming back to your question, what do people want to see out the back of it? And I think you are all huge advocates in the community around physical health and well-being, and we need to think closely about, we don't just get that multi-sport event type bounce that you get where people play sports for a month or so after and then there's no further investment and it all dwindles away again, which there's a lot of evidence of that happening in the past. So how do we make this different? What are the projects that are going to last much longer and leave a real longer legacy in terms of health and well-being? I think that's a challenge for all of us. We talked about Sport Birmingham and others, but there's some great agencies out there doing some fabulous work that are aligned to the games, but the works, as I say, should continue long after it. And then also, I think just the really simple thing about, when you talk to a lot of people about legacy from the games, they say to us, we're hugely under-recognised as a city and a region across the country and internationally. And people don't understand the transformation that this city has gone through over the last probably 20, 25 years. This is our opportunity to really put us on the map. So I think almost brand Birmingham, which then entails a huge amount of things, can completely change on the back of the games. And if you speak to people in Manchester, for example, they'll tell you the Commonwealth Games there was the real trigger for kind of turning around brand Manchester to some degree. And we all know London's an international city and a global city anyway, but this is really Birmingham's time to shine. And, if suddenly the international spotlight's on it, showcases the best of it, that will leave a huge legacy in terms of pride and long-term investment in tourism in the city. So, yeah, those are big aspirations, but we've got some great people working in the space. And actually, from what I've seen, maybe being that 8 or so years behind, it certainly isn't reflected in the work that's going on. So, yeah, really confident we'll get there, Owen.
Thank you. Just another one. You've talked a little bit about how the games will be accessible for disabled people, really trying to reach out to a multicultural community. Adding on to that, how will Birmingham 2022 be, as it says on the website, the most accessible Commonwealth Games in history for all of Birmingham's residents? And I'm thinking particularly about some of the socially deprived areas of Birmingham and some of the areas that are far away from the hub sites. How's it going to reach them?
Great question, because I think you're right. People ask you about accessibility and you instantly jump to focus on whether it's disabled access to venues or other things. But your point was spot on about how do we address accessibility in its widest sense around everything from ticket pricing, everything from making sure transport's available to some of those areas. And just to touch on both of those things, which are huge drivers of that. Firstly, we are not putting in place a ticking pricing strategy that I would say would be the most commercially advantageous. We are going to have some expensive tickets, but we are going to have a lot of tickets that are very much affordable, with a number of initiatives about how they reach out to people, but also looking at how we make sure local people, because some of this is local have preferential access to some of those tickets as well. Now, even affordable tickets might be hard to reach for some people. So what we are looking at, which has worked successfully in previous events, is something called, or maybe rebranded, but something along the lines of Gift of the Games. And what we try and do is partner with the private sector and say, okay, through your own CSR budgets or through you as a sponsor and how you activate, can you buy tens of thousands of tickets that we can make available free of charge to those in the poorest communities within the region who can come and experience the games like everybody else. It's not in place yet, but I would be stunned if we don't get there with a sizable programme in that space. So in terms of getting into venues, watching sport, yes, there'll be affordable tickets, and yes, we'll have a programme where there'll be tickets, I am sure, that are free to access. But there are also free to access events anyway, and people sometimes forget that, whether it's getting out in the street and watching road races, time trials and bikes, or the marathon. You can go up to Cannock Chase and watch, and you can watch the mountain biking. And there's a number that you can access. Triathlon events as well are free of charge. But then there's the other point you made about how do we get to these venues. So if you do have one of those tickets, either that you've paid for as expensive tickets, cheaper tickets, or a ticket that you've accessed through this Gift of the Games programme, that will include access to public transport. So you won't need to pay again to get on the bus, train, taxi, whatever it is. So if you've got that ticket in your hand, you should be able to go up to the bus driver or the train driver and they should let you on. All the mechanics of that have to be worked through, but those principles are generally agreed, which hopefully therefore means there will be a lot of people in the community who perhaps are sitting right now saying, I'm not going to be able to afford to get to these games, who can access a ticket and who can get there and back to see the sport as well.
Thank you, Ian. That sounds really promising. Just a final note from me. I'm a stone's throw, a 5-minute walk away from the Alexander Stadium. Do you want me to go and measure out the 200-metre track in light of Noah Lyle's supposed world record last night?
I watched that last night. I watched it. It was incredible, wasn't it? I knew he was fast. And I thought, wow, that's because it was one of these virtual races, wasn't it? And he'd won by an absolute mile. And I thought, oh, wow, he's really fast. 18.5, I think he got in the end or something. So into a headwind as well. Yeah, I think we need to do that due diligence, don't we? Let's make sure we get the start line right. So Owen, if you want to go around and check it out for us once the track's laid, you're more than welcome.
No problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Owen.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, Hannah. Just a couple more questions, if that's okay, Ian. So, as restrictions continue to ease, businesses open and people start to go back to their kind of daily life, what would your message be to support motivation and inspiration as people still struggle and are fearful of, the challenging times at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question, Andy. I think hopefully come 2022 in our event, we are back to some degree of normality. I think what we are hearing certainly from government is that, maybe they're badging 2020 as a year of sickness, 2021 the year of recovery, and then 2022 the year of celebration. So in terms of that motivation, what we would hope people have got at least in the back of their mind, and we know people have got much bigger challenges right now than necessarily thinking 2 years ahead, but we should be aiming for that 2022 to be the year of celebration. We should be seeing the people that look forward. We'll get people back together. We'll put on a fantastic show like you've never seen before in your city and region. It will be the place to be. You'll get that human interaction that you're probably missing now. You'll get that huge buzz of a crowd all supporting, a home team. And it will just be incredible. And until you're in it, it's hard to paint the picture. But I know you guys will have been to some of these events, and they're just incredible. So if anything, just hold on to that thought, and we will get through this. I am sure all those huge brains across the world are going to get us a vaccine and some treatment soon, I hope. And then, what I'd say to everyone around the region is, look, actually, hopefully we've got a time slot now that allows enough time for things to get back to normal in the event world, and therefore we're going to have this really special event for you to look forward to.
Fantastic. My final question is, if you could think of a quote, which I've asked in all my interviews, I've asked people about what would your quote be to support motivation and inspiration, and why?
A quote to support inspiration and motivation. You know, I think on that, my quote would be, and it links to the games, you know, you be part of the journey, the solution, and the opportunity. Don't watch it happening. And if I lay that in a game scenario, we've got all of those opportunities. You'll love it. You'll be inspired and you'll be motivated if you come on the journey with us, rather than watch it happening, because you'll regret it.
But Ian Reid, thank you so much for the interview, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Hannah, Owen, always a pleasure to have you join me on these interviews, and I can't wait to see you in Birmingham Commonwealth Games 2022. Thank you so much. You take care, stay safe, and take care.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I know you're all big supporters of the event, and I know, Andy, you've been to some of our celebrations in the past, and hopefully a few more coming in the future. So I look forward to seeing you in person. And thanks again for all your support and the support that I'm sure is coming over the next couple of years. So thanks all. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much. You take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, Hannah. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye now. Bye.